Okay, we'll get started. So welcome everyone to this webinar from Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, which is all about unlocking potential in your classroom with Cambridge Primary Insight. So before we start the session, I'll just go through some housekeeping for the webinar. So to ensure good sound quality, all members of the audience are muted. If you would like to ask a question, and please do ask questions as we go along, please post them in the question section on the right-hand side of your screen. We will look at the questions at the end of the webinar or throughout the session where relevant. You'll receive a certificate of attendance sent to your email inbox an hour after the webinar finishes, and you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording sent via email next week. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from today, so please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from and where you're listening from in the question section. So I'll say a few words to introduce Cambridge Chem, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring. So we've been working with schools for 40 years in over 100 countries. We're known for our evidence-based research approach to baseline and formative assessments using extensive data sets to support future outcomes and development. We work with schools, ministries and associations to transform the outcomes of the students they teach. In 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge, which has supported our reach and abilities to support young people across the world. We help teachers turn data into knowledge, we bridge the gap between research and practice, and we provide evidence to support good decision making. So I'll now hand over to Mark Fraser, our Teaching and Learning Lead, who will be running today's session.
Thanks, Cora, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. Thank you very, very much for making the time to come along and listen to what we've got to say. So as Cora says, I'm the Teaching and Learning Lead. I have been in Chem for about coming up to 8 years now. I'm a former teacher and head teacher and work mainly in schools in and around the northeast of England. So I've always had a real interest in the whole process of taking assessment information and doing something useful with it in the classroom. Ultimately, that's what makes the difference. So what I'd like to spend a bit of time today is just talking through our new product, our Cambridge Primary Insight, which is a development from the old Inca system. If you are aware of that, you might know something about it already, and we'll be telling you a little bit more about that as we go through. Cora is just sitting across the table from me, so hopefully if she sees any interesting questions, can wave at me, and we can do our best to answer them as we go. If not, at the end, we'll do our best to have a roundup and answer any queries that you may have. So Cambridge Primary Insight fits into this gap here, where you can see that the third figure across. This sort of just represents the range of Chem and Cambridge products that we have, which assess children from the early years with aspects all the way up to post-16 with Alice. So we are talking today about Cambridge Primary Insight. So that's typically children from the ages of 5 up to 11. The Chem products measure different things. They measure similar things, but there are subtle differences between the systems, and we try to make it as age appropriate as possible. But just to focus on the Insight, you can see there that there's the emphasis is on reading and spelling, mathematics, arithmetic, basically the 4 operations, mental maths problems, that sort of thing, and developed ability, which we'll talk more about as we go, which is a lot of the content there is relating to non-verbal reasoning and problem solving. Each module takes about 20 minutes for a student to complete, and each module can be taken in one combined session or in individual sessions. Totally flexible to suit your timetabling requirements and the practical setup in your school. So today then, we are going to talk about the assessment itself, Cambridge Primary Insight. We'll think a little bit about the benefits of using that, and we'll have a look at some example questions before moving on to the reports. And then finally, just to round things off, we'll think about how can using Insight help to improve learning outcomes in your school. Firstly, what's new about Cambridge Primary Insight? As I mentioned a few moments ago, Insight is the next generation of our much-loved Inca system. That's an assessment that's been extensively used by learners around the world for about 20 years now. An enormous amount of investment has gone into improving the assessment in terms of the experience for students and teachers, and there's some notable changes, and you can see in the forthcoming slides what they are. So as well as that, behind the scenes, if you like, things have changed significantly to improve the administrative and technical performance of the new system. We've made many of these improvements following customer feedback, but we're trying to walk a fine line between giving customers something new, but also maintaining what lots of customers know and like about Incus and what's kept them using it for so long. So in terms of things we've added, you can see we've got new multiple user administration access, improved assessment admin and interface panels. We've got better access for organizations and a much more intuitive navigational system around the reports, and also interactive reports with filters just to allow you to sort of focus in on that data that means so much to you much more rapidly. We're also offering new teacher guidance, which thinks a little bit beyond the sort of the kind of basic how to use the system steps and thinks about what you might do next with learners. We've got a new interface which works across desktop and tablet devices. We've worked extensively with colleagues across the wider Cambridge organisation to review the questions and to think about the barriers for students for whom English may be an additional language. And we're trying to sort of make things far more accessible, and also new tools, just guidance tools, next steps, all those sorts of everyday things that you need in the classroom just to help support your students and improve engagement. And also, like we have in systems like BASE, we're introducing a report for parents, carers, or guardians as well, because a lot of customers really like using those just to scaffold discussions in parents' evenings, parents' meetings, and also just to supplement the end of year academic report that schools traditionally produce. And just to point out, this isn't a done. The job is not complete yet. It's not a done deal in terms of we are still working on things, and we will be doing that in the months and years ahead. So you will see future tweaks and developments as we go. So we are trying to be far more responsive and listen to what customers are telling us, and we're doing our best to make the product as best we can, just to make that difference with learners in the classroom and to make the life easier for teachers. So benefits of using Insight. If you haven't heard the phrase before, I'll talk a little bit about adaptive assessment, which basically means each student gets a slightly different experience depending on their responses to the questions. So students are presented with a question that links in with what we expect a typical student of that age to be able to answer. So if this is a 7-year-old student, we will be giving them a question that we think most 7-year-olds have a good chance of answering correctly. If they answer that correctly, they will be presented with a more challenging question, get that right, an even more challenging question follows, and so on. So they go up this ladder, if you like, until they reach a point where they are unable to answer, and then the system sort of drops back down again, gives them something slightly easier, and so on, until it finds their level. So because we're doing that, we actually are shortening the length of the assessment itself. So that saves time. So also, it means that if you're sitting side by side with other students, you can't see what others are doing. They will be working on different problems to the one you're on as an individual student. You'll be getting something quite bespoke. It's flexible and fun, and we can, as mentioned earlier, you can use it in its entirety in one go, or you can break it up and use it sort of module by module. When I was back in school, I used Incus, and we used to do maybe 1 week we would do the English related things, the next week might do the maths or the developed ability and so on. So you can break it up and spread it around the timetable. It's student led, so you do not have to worry. Once the students are up and running and on the system, they're off, and they will hopefully not need any assistance. typically they're sitting there with a pair of headphones on, listening to the instructions. Sometimes there are on-screen prompts as well, but basically you can be doing this with, you know, a room full of students in parallel, everybody following their own path. Teachers tend to be useful, very useful, you know, where we haven't been replaced by AI in many ways yet, just to kind of give that reassurance and help students who might be just having a little problem accessing it, you know, putting the password in. So there's all those kind of organizational things that you still need to do. We haven't come up with a system of getting away from that, but this is about just, you know, shepherding your students in a sensitive and caring and supportive way. And when you've done all of the assessment part, the reports come back, you can see those, you know, instant insight, and use that to, you know, look at areas of the curriculum that you need to focus on with groups and individuals. You can measure sort of the potential of students. If you're doing this, you know, on repeated occasions, you start to see a path forming, and basically that helps you to look at the here and now, but also to, you know, think about what you're going to do in the future, but also to look back and see where you've come from. So lots of reasons to be, you know, assessing and measuring what students know and can do. So just a little bit more about the adaptive system that I talked about there. So just again, if this is new to you, you might just you wonder what it actually is and how it works. So we're presenting questions according to the responses that are given. If the response is correct, those questions will increase in difficulty. Likewise, the other side of the coin, you know, if the response is incorrect, we'll give students something a little bit more manageable and a little bit more reassuring. And they will see different sets of questions. So the modules themselves, you can see there, we've got reading, spelling, general maths, mental arithmetic, or sometimes I think I might just be referring to that as arithmetic. They're the, you know, the simple basic calculations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And this developed ability module, again, might be new to you. You might not have heard of that, but you will see some examples as we go on. But that's looking at sort of reasoning and problem-solving strategies that students use. So some questions then. What do they look like? Most of the questions are multiple choice, and we're just having a look at some of the reading ones to start with here. Yeah, some of the questions there are, you know, that you'll see are quite basic, and these step up in difficulty as students are more successful answering them, but also in age. But the general starting point is, as mentioned, a question that's suitable for chronological age, and then the sequence follows on from that point depending on the responses. Many of the questions are in multiple choice format, and the students provided with audio instructions. They simply listen to or read the instructions in some cases and follow the questions through before clicking or tapping on the correct response. Other formats include choosing a response from a simple drop-down list, and other formats or paradigms, as assessment folk call them, as we go through the system. You'll see some examples of these. So we've got, again, a very simple question here that the child will hear a word read out, and then they simply click on the matching word. So they are hearing something, and we're working out, can they read the word that they've just heard? Again, there are some real words, there are some pseudo words as well mixed in there as well. Again, so we are looking at sort of those basic phonic skills as well, and we're trying to put in some slightly unusual words that children may not have seen before. So we're trying to work out, like in this case, is this the word I think that's being read out here is DAP. That's the one, that's the correct one that's highlighted. So if the child hears DAP, they click DAP. So if it's a slightly unusual word, they might not have seen this before as well. So we're ruling out sight vocabulary, and we're looking at the phonic skills. Moving on, things become a little bit more sophisticated, and then we have this format, which is, we refer to these as Hunter Grundens. They're developed by an academic, Elizabeth Hunter Grunden, a few years ago, who has produced something that looks a little bit like a close procedure, if you know what one of those is. Basically, where the learner reads along and they choose at each point an appropriate word. So they would choose, as I was walking home from my friend. So I would click on home, and then that drops into the space from my friend's house. Last Thursday evening, I saw something really strange. So as they're clicking the words, these words are dropping into place. So it's building up this paragraph. So we're looking at the ability to read accurately, but also the ability to choose the correct meaning for the word meaning for that particular situation. So again, it's a variation on the comprehension format. And then moving on, we've got some maths questions. So again, just a reminder there, we have the different sections. We've got number 1, which is basic maths that we start with. Number 2, which goes on to more kind of involved problems and a little bit more complicated questions, including algebra. We have measure, shape, and space. And then data handling questions, so looking at simple charts and graphs and tables. Again, showing you some really basic ones to start with here, but if you put one more bike in the picture, how many would there be? You can see 3 bicycles. If there's one more, how many would there be? So you click on on 4, hopefully, and you'd be presented with a more complicated question. Again, this is leaping up the ladder quite a bit here, and you can see, we've got some sort of little problems. We've got shapes, and there's some kind of reading of the question. So we are looking at sort of decoding questions in maths as well, taking out the information that we need and solving little, tricky little problems like this. Going at a bit of a gallop here because there's a lot to get through. So we're just going to move on. We're going to have a look at developed ability. So this is, as I mentioned before, a good indication of students' ability to, interpret problems, apply solutions, and also just sort of think a little bit more creatively. It's fairly well, some of it is language dependent because we've got a vocab section. Going back to Kem's early days, one of the big sort of indicators of future academic success is the breadth and the richness of an individual's vocabulary. So we take that as one of the measures. One of the founding fathers of Kem all those years ago was Professor Peter Timms, and he put a lot of work into looking at this. So we think, if we can develop a really good understanding of your students' abilities and their vocab in particular, that's a really, really useful indicator. But also we have language sort of independent measures as well. So you would see little problems like this, where you have an array of dots, and then you're next presented with a larger blank array, and you've got to try and look for the first pattern in the second pattern. And the students do this by clicking on they kind of color the dots in by clicking on the ones where they think they are. So just click the next button, and hopefully you can see where the first pattern is hidden. So you can see there it's embedded in that matrix there. So these kind of visual, and there we have other sort of spatial reasoning kinds of problems as well. Again, these are really interesting because these are language independent this time, and this gives you a really balanced view, so that if students perhaps aren't doing tremendously well with the language side of things, but they are with the non-verbal side of things, that's really revealing. And maybe it's exposing a potential barrier that's maybe why the student isn't moving on quite as quickly, just simply because they might have the mechanics of reading, they've got the good problem solving skills, so we know that there's ability there, but they're just not able to access or sort of understand what's being asked for them. So again, this has been tried over years with Incas, and we think this is a really, really interesting indicator, particularly for students for whom English is an additional language. So we're looking at capacity to learn and capacity to make progress. So that's the sort of the hidden sort of value within developed ability. We have traditional spelling activities as well, just getting back to the language side of things, where a student hears a word read out and they use the on-screen keyboard just to key in the correct response. Again, we've got all sorts of simple words to start with, building up to far more challenging multi syllabic words. up to the typical reading age of about 16. So we have the arithmetic section here as well, and again, very, very simple, so we're not looking at anything other than the simple mechanics of 4 operations. So 3 plus 1 in this case, all the student needs to do is have a look, work that out and click on the correct response. So these interfaces are really simple, very similar to the Incus interface if you knew it. So we know that's tried and tested and it works. It shouldn't be a problem-solving activity in itself, just answering the question. So this is just really, very, very basic, uncomplicated format, because we don't want to confuse the students. We just want this to be as simple and as easy to access as possible. And then the maths, the mental arithmetic is graded as well. So we tend to work through addition, and if the students are doing all right at that, then we'll look at subtraction. If they're successful there, we'll look at multiplication and division, because we've got years and years of evidence now which suggests that's typically the order in which children progress through the 4 operations. So we don't want to be giving children questions that they're going to struggle with unless they're dealing with the more basic concepts. So moving on, we've got some new reports. So you'll remember, if you've used Incus before, a lot of the reports were Excel based. So they were in Excel spreadsheets. And we have a new suite of reports which works on a different platform altogether. So they've been designed following a series of customer conversations. Perhaps you were in one of those conversations, and if you were, thank you so much for the time you gave us. So we've developed a range of far more sort of accessible and easier to filter reports, which you'll see the filters in a moment. But we are retaining the same age equivalent and age standardized scores that customers tell us they use and they like. So age equivalent scores, we'll talk a little bit about this in a little while, but we've got a fairly sort of stats independent figure. So we know how old the child is, and because we've asked thousands and thousands of children these questions, we know what a typical 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, and so on can do. So we give a chronological age and a sort of a performance age. That's what we call the age equivalent score. So I might be doing the assessment and I'm doing particularly well in one section, and if I was 7 years old, I was doing really well, I might actually have an age equivalent score of, say, 7 years and 6 months. If I wasn't doing quite so well, my age equivalent score might be a little bit less. So it might be 6 years and 6 months. And again, this is really intuitive and easy to understand. You can identify the students who are doing very well and need to be challenged. And yet we can see those students who just need that support to push them up to where they need to be in terms of their age-related expectations. So we also show the differences as well, just to kind of focus in, so you can see, if there is a 6-month difference above or below, that's starting to become significant. So we need to sort of highlight that kind of difference. And then we can see individual pupil attainment profiles, age standardized scores, your typical sort of score that's based on a mean of 100. So if you're bang on sort of expectation for your age, you'll have a score of 100. If you're doing a little bit better than that, you'll have a score larger than 100. If you're doing not quite so well, slightly below average, it would be a score below 100. We also have some cohort profile reports coming in September, and some pupil progress reports, which might be a little bit further down the line because you need several iterations of assessment data to access those. So they will probably not make sense for a little while. And I know we are planning to move, if you're an Incus customer, your data will go across as well onto the new system. So again, we will not lose that historical data. So the filters, when you log on, you can see you can filter by the academic year, by year group, standardization. So depending on, we have a state standardization and an independent standardization at the moment. Typically they're based on the UK. We need more data in the pot, as it were, to do other regions. But again, people might want to ask questions about that. We'll do our best to answer them. You can break it down by class and age score type. So that's either the age equivalent score. as I mentioned before, or the age standardized score. And again, you can choose the module that you're viewing. You can have a look at that by the different sections. So summary of scores. This is the age equivalence display. So you can see, a list of students, and you can see, for example, a score, typical score for a learner who's exactly 7 years old will be shown as an age equivalence score of 7 years and 0 months. And that age equivalence is then, assigned to the question at the starting point. We look for a question that relates to that age, and the student sort of goes through the system. So we're assessing them from their chronological age, and then we calculate the age equivalence depending on how they respond. So this table that I'm showing you here, we've just got sort of the overall overview here. So you can see we've got general maths, mental arithmetic, reading, spelling, and developed ability. So it's giving you a nice breakdown of how the student performed in each of those areas. Again, this table, this next one, this shows the age of the student in years and months at the time of taking the different assessment modules. And then again, in brackets, you can see, just to focus in this time, if a student is 9, for example, or 9.3. Oh, actually, sorry, I'll just backtrack slightly. I just should have pointed out, if you see something like in age at assessment where you've got 9.3 to 9.4, so 9 years and 3 months to 9 years and 4 months, that's because the modules may have been taken at slightly different times. They may have been spread out over a few weeks. So that's why it looks a little bit imprecise. So we're not giving you a specific age at time of assessment. We're saying when the process started, the student was 9 and 3 months. And by the time they had completed it, that was a month on, so they were 9 and 4 months. So that's why that looks a little bit unusual perhaps there. And then you can see the age equivalent scores for maths, numbers, algebra, data handling, measure, shape, and space. And in brackets, that's the difference. So whether it's if it's a minus value, they're working slightly below expectation. If it's a positive value, they're working above age-related expectation. So we also are going to color code the information when you get it, and we're basing the color coding on the standardization rather than the age equivalence. So the color coding won't appear in the age equivalence. This will just be in the age standardized tables. So as mentioned before, we've got some basic understanding that we have a big distribution curve, and we know that this curve, if you are bang in the middle of it, you are average. That means you are sort of totally in line with sort of age-related expectation in this instance. So you will have a score of 100. Again, apologies, this is dummy data, so don't pay too much attention to the color coding, but we will be highlighting scores that are well above or well below. So that's typically from 85 or below, or 115 or above. So we've got this big swathe in the middle that we expect most students to fit into. About 68% of students will have a score between 185 and 115. So that's kind of the norm, if you like. So we're looking at the sort of the students who sort of lie outside that boundary there. So again, nothing complicated. We're just sort of hopefully drawing your eye to a particular issue that you might want to go and look at and just think, well, Mark's done very well in this, that, and the other, but I can see he's highlighted in sort of in that reddy pink color there. So wonder why he hasn't done so well in mental arithmetic. Let's just go and have a look at that. Again, we have more sort of complicated sort of tables with far more detail in them. So this is an individual student report. So you get for not a group of students, but a breakdown for an individual student right across the board, looking at everything. And also a little graphic next to it as well that you can see where typically the red line is showing us where they should be according to their age. And the little boxes show whether they are above or below. So the dark line in the box shows the age of the student at the time of the assessment. Sorry, beg your pardon, the black dot at the bottom of the box shows where they were in relation to their age at the time of assessment. So you can see the grey line here, if you can see my mouse moving, that shows that this is where we're expecting the student to be. That's the sort of the age-related expectation, and their score was actually down here, so they're quite a little way down there. However, in reading, you can see they're just above. So that's quite interesting background information, so you can see how we'd expect the student to perform, how they did perform, and how they relate to other students in their group. Again, just going to sort of move through some of these tables quite quickly. We can talk about this sort of in greater detail later on, but you can just have just zoomed in a little bit. Apologize for the tiny writing, but you can see basically this is just giving you a detailed summary for each module in each section, showing the student's age, the age equivalent score, and the difference between them. So again, when you get the slides, you can have a look at these at a little bit more of a leisurely pace perhaps, and you can see where the students should be in relation to the age-related expectation. So that, as mentioned before, that grey line on the box, that's the age of the student, the dot is their score, and the red is the sort of the midpoint, if you like, the average measure for their year group. We've also kept the year group overview as well, the old box and whisker plots, if you like. Again, this is dummy data, and it's showing a slightly unusual pattern, but we're just kind of trying to prove a point here, really, when we look at these. But these are really popular reports for people who've used INCUS, and the teachers really like using these just because it shows the spread of data. This is just a nice little device to do that. So you can see the boxes have what we call whiskers on top of them, these bars. So this shows the spread of scores from the highest up at the top to the lowest at the bottom typically. The box itself represents the middle 50% of students. So these are the sort of what we would call the interquartile range. And if we have some extreme scores that are sort of well beyond expectation, we sort of truncate the whisker and we show them as little X's. And if they're really well out, this graph hasn't got one on, but you can see they're sometimes represented as a little circle as well. And the horizontal line in the blue box, if you like, that's the midpoint, that's the median, it's the middle scoring student's score in the year group. And the width of the boxes also indicates the range of the ages of the students. So it's just like a spread diagram here as well. So you can see, looking at the younger children, they're quite neatly truncated. You go from kind of year 1 to year 2, there's no overlap. They're sort of butting up against each other quite nicely. But you can see, between year 2 and 3, there is some overlap. So there are students in here who may be in this year group in year 3 or year 2. So we've got some kind of, maybe a student has been, or a little group of students have been held back a year for some reason, and we're just trying to represent that there. Equally, it's a much greater problem of overlap between years 4 and 5. Again, it's unlikely that you would see this in your school, but we're just trying to show you the functionality here, so you can see any kind of quirks or anomalies in the system. And again, when you're sharing this data with perhaps school governors, or local authority type, advisors, or from, staff from multi-academy trusts, they can get a better picture of, the typical demographics that are making up your year group in terms of the sort of the ages at least. And also, you can see, going back, the green line there, that's just typically showing you the sort of age-related expectation. That's the trend. So what we would hope to see is a nice sort of year-on-year progression, as if these, year by year, these year groups are going up, just showing us that the children overall, that sort of helicopter, aerial view, it's showing you that the progression is doing what it should be doing here. And if you've got your black line on the box intersecting with that green line, that's pretty much where you need to be. Above that, brilliant. Keep doing what you're doing. If it's below, then you're going to be thinking about intervention strategies to put into place. So we've got a parent and guardian report. So this starts off with a very simple oversight of what Cambridge Primary Insight is, before going on to look at how a student performed and given just a few examples of the kinds of things that the particular student was asked to do. So very simple, no stats here, just graphics. So we've got a simple kind of bar graph, if you like, which just shows progression, up the scale, left to right in the different overall modules. We've got mental arithmetic, general maths, reading, and developed ability. The little black circles indicate where the relative positioning of the score was. So you can see we would expect students to be somewhere in that blue box, that blue rectangle there. So you can see this particular learner has done very well in mental arithmetic, general maths, and reading. But for some reason, their developed ability score is a little bit below the expected range there. So what we would just hope to do is just maybe in the first instance just have a chat with that student as well, and the parents, and just explain what had gone on, and think maybe we just need a little bit of practice here with problem solving and doing simple puzzles and things like that. Really good things to do with young children in particular, just to get them thinking in a creative way, because that's a really key skill for later in life. Problem solving, looking at a situation that's a little bit unusual and trying to come up with a way around it. So again, nothing complicated, hopefully really friendly, accessible information, but quite revealing at the same time. And also we have, again, just tends to be used sort of for internal purposes, but we have the internal individual progress report, which you would want to use as parts within year groups or within schools more broadly, within multi-academy trusts perhaps. You can look to see how individual students are doing compared with their sort of projected path through the system. So again, we've got some points of reference on here, other context here. These are kind of longitudinal charts, so we're looking over time what's happened, and this is an age equivalent chart. So you can see on the vertical axis there, you've got the age equivalent score, and you've got the year group and the age at point of the assessment. So we want to see a kind of progression from the bottom left corner up to the upper right corner. The grey dotted line represents the national average, and the blue dotted line is the year group average. The red is the individual students track through that. So again, you can see we've fluctuated a little bit about the expected path, but by the time we're into year 5 there, Norma here is doing quite well. So we just need to keep on doing what we're doing to support Norma. And again, we've got these reports for the key sort of core sort of modules, if you like, the reading, the general maths, developed ability, and the arithmetic. And finally, just to move on before we have any questions, let's just have a very quick think about what you can do to use the insight information that it generates to improve learning outcomes. So we see this as fitting into a general plan, to improve things. In fact, well, plan is the core sort of aspect of it as well, which we'll come back to, because that's kind of the key job, the preliminary job of teachers, isn't it? So we're going to kind of assess the students. We're going to look at them in a comfortable and supportive way, and just find out as much as we can from a formative and diagnostic point of view. What can we do? What do you know? And what can we do to support you to move on? That's what this is about. So we're going to look at the assessment itself. We're going to do that. We're going to take the data from that and analyze it. We're going to think about what it's showing us for individuals and groups. We're going to try and pinpoint some gaps in learning. You can use that data as well to compare, performance with, various benchmarks, as we said, whether it's a year group itself or more broadly, all the children who have done INCUS over the years is the sort of the foundation of this. So this has been done by thousands and thousands of students now, so we know exactly what students can do at a particular age. Once you've got that information as a teacher, here's the P word again, you're going to plan what you're going to do. Think about it in isolation in your group perhaps, but also collaborate with your colleagues. Play to your strengths and tailor your teaching. You can use the information to raise expectations and set realistic but challenging targets, and also to help you to plan interventions, little bits of support that you can put in, or more, widespread whole school systems, what do you need to do? And of course, once you've done that planning, you need to teach. You're going to work with the students. You're going to support them to develop the understanding in these key areas and track what they've done. You can talk to parents as well. You can see, what the information that you're getting from your colleagues and outside of, the school environment as well. Parents really, really, insightful. You need to understand what the children are doing when they go home. I mean, typically, I always worked out when I had students in my school, I had them for about 17% of their waking time, I think. So what on earth's going on in the other sort of 83%? So you need that sort of general understanding. And of course, once you've been around that cycle once, you reflect at the end, has it worked? Do we need to do anything differently? If it's working, great, let's keep doing what we're doing. If it's not working, well, we need to think again and just look for patterns, trends, and evaluate the impact of what you're doing in the classroom. And then back to the start of the cycle again. And using the information from Insight, you can look at this multi-level. So as we've said, this could be an overview for school leaders. You're looking at school and group level information and focusing down to sort of the class level. As a teacher, you want to look at how your group's performing, who needs that support, who needs the challenge. And then on an individual basis, we can look for sort of gaps in knowledge and understanding. So again, that informs planning on an individual, very granular level, and supports conversations with students themselves. I think we mustn't forget feedback in a timely way. You find this out and you talk to a student as quickly as you can and help get them back on track if that's what they need, or push them further if they need that challenge, because quite often it's those students who are doing all right who are sometimes overlooked. So they're doing all right, but they could be doing even better with that kind of sensitive and supportive spirit to sort of just push them on and move their learning on so that they can achieve their true potential. So once you've got your information, you're probably going to think, right, what do I need to do? And again, this is just a personal recommendation. Again, if you're from the UK, you might know about the Education Endowment Foundation. I'll just point out that we're not connected with them in any way, but this is a really useful organization to go and have a look at their website. And I used this when I was back in school. It's a UK-based charity, if you like. That's just there to provide an excellent range of guidance and suggestions for making improvements in key areas of learning. There's a range of documents and useful summaries, which you might be able to use. For instance, I've got two examples here: improving maths in the early years in Key Stage 1, improving maths in Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. So you've got some really nice sort of flow charts. What they do is they do a really good sort of evaluation of intervention programs and what works and what doesn't work quite so successfully, and they sort of give them sort of ratings as to how effective they think they are. So if you're thinking about putting things in place, have a look at this website. It's got some really, really useful advice and some guidance. And then I think we'd just like to finish off by saying that Cambridge Primary Insight provides you with just that very thing, insight. That's insight into what your students know and can do in key areas of learning in a convenient and objective way. And we would be delighted if we could provide you with that actionable information that you need to unlock your students' full potential. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much for sticking with us while we had a couple of technical hitches earlier on, and I hope we found it to be useful and informative. And if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them now, or if we can't answer them now, one of our team will get back to you soon. So Cora, I'm just wondering, are there any things there that we can be having a look at, and any questions to answer?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Really interesting that. So I'll have a look through if we've got any questions. Please do use the question box on the right hand of your screen to post anything if there's anything you'd like us to go over or discuss. Let's have a look. So we've got a couple of questions about students taking the assessment. someone is asking, is there a chance for students to do a practice run of how the test works? And also, when they answer the questions, are they told if they've got it correct or incorrect?
Good questions. In terms of having a practice run, each module generally starts off with 2 or 3 practice questions just to get the students tuned into what they know, what they need to do, and what kind of things they need to know in order to answer the questions. So that's sort of all inbuilt. It does not give any clues as to how things are going, and I think again this is the sort of the psychometrics behind it. We're trying to make this as sort of informal and as sort of pleasant an experience as possible in many ways. So we're not doing this to sort of demotivate students. This is all about motivating them, and I think the students will see. They will develop. It's interesting when you talk to students who do this, they kind of develop a feel for how things are going. And it's quite nice when you see they do something, they get it right, they get a more challenging question. Oh, right, okay, here's another step up, and so on. So they see things increasing quite gently in the first instance, and then sort of building up. If the student's really doing very well, things will sort of increase to a point where things will become a little bit more challenging. But at the same time, if they see things that they just don't understand, they will sort of drop back down to something that's a little bit more familiar, but overtly no sort of ticks or crosses or anything like that appearing.
Great, thank you, Mark. We've got a couple of questions coming in about the parent report and how you might suggest that could be used to inform conversations with parents, or how useful it can be as a sort of conversation starter.
Yeah, it's just very much, again, if there are any users out there who've used BASE, it's a development on from the parent report in BASE. In terms of what we want to do is just explain in the first instance to the parents what their children have been doing, because quite often, lots of schools choose to sort of announce that they will be doing an assessment like this, or certainly if they don't do that, children will go home and talk about what they've been doing in school, so the parents will know one way or the other. So we just want to explain what it is we're measuring. We're looking at these kind of fundamental skills in sort of primary learning, and really just reassure parents that this is nothing sinister. We're not using this as any kind of high stakes measure. This is just there to inform teachers, find out what their students, what they're in their class. We want to know what the individuals are doing, what the class is doing, so parents kind of need to understand that. And also just showing the parents in a very sort of simplified, sort of graphical way, as I sort of showed a few minutes ago, with the horizontal colored bars with the little dot that moves along, and just showing that parents, that students fit in to this sort of broad range here. We mustn't get too worried if they're sort of slightly lower down, than others, because this is just typically what students know and can do at that particular age. We're not sort of sorting them or putting them into groups or anything like that. This is just formative information that goes back. So it's a reassurance exercise, I suppose, as well. But also it highlights maybe where children, if they are sort of falling out of the expected range there a little bit, what could parents be doing to help at home? So if it is, say, mental arithmetic, they could be doing little bits of practice with their children at home. There's the never-ending problem of reading with your children. My daughter's a bit older now, but certainly when she was younger, then there's that constant sort of need to sort of encourage her, and also not just read with the children, as we know, but to kind of talk about what you've read as well, and those kind of wider, sort of broader, deeper skills. So the inferential skills, the sort of the comprehension skills, parents can play a massive part in improving reading there. Because I think, as we know, most children who do very well at reading, they're not just reading in school, they're reading at home as well. So it's about involving the parents, explaining to them what's going on, and getting them on board to help and to support and encourage.
Great, thank you. We've got a few questions as well asking about the sort of time frame of the assessments in the academic year. So can the assessments be taken at multiple points during the year? And is it preferable to take them at the beginning of the academic year, the end, both? What are your thoughts on that?
Two thoughts on that, actually. Well, firstly, the practical question to start with, you can use it at any time, and that's why we have the age equivalent scores as we do. I suppose historically they evolved so that you can use them at any point in the year, and it shows the chronological age at the time of the assessment and the sort of the relative performance, the age equivalent score alongside that. The age standardized scores are also adjusted for when in the year they're taken as well. So they're sort of adjusted for two reasons: to reflect the child's age, but also to reflect the time in the year, because we recognize clearly the further into that academic year you go, the more the children will have learned, and the expectation sort of goes up. So any time of the year is fine. I found, this is again just a personal view, but I found that doing INCUS, as it was in those days, but Primary Insight as it is today, at the start of the year was kind of useful in the sense that teachers had ownership of that data. They took their children into the computer room or wherever they did it. They invested all the time in doing that. They looked at the data and they were really keen on they were invested in it, if you like. So they were keener to do something with the data because they'd played a part in gathering it. If you do it at the end of the year, it's useful in the sense that it could be a kind of a marker. This is how far my children got while they were with me, kind of thing. However, I think as soon as you take that data and hand that over to another teacher, it's a danger that it becomes, and what a colleague once referred to as shelfware. So you take that data that your colleague has lovingly sort of curated and bundled together, and you think, oh, thank you very much, and you pop it on the shelf and you think, I'll have a look at that in September, and sadly it just sits there. So I think that sort of from a formative point of view, it's probably, if I was doing it, I would be using it earlier in the year. That said, we would always say that this should just be one tool in the toolkit. So you might want to do your own kind of in-house formative assessments earlier in the year, and then use this as a check in the middle or towards the end of the year. So again, that's possibly not answering the question, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is it's versatile. You can use it to suit your own circumstances, and just a personal view of what I did with it when I was back in school.
Great, thank you. So I think we've just about got time for one more question. So we have a few questions here about different curriculums. So we have schools joining us from across the world today, and how can chem assessments or Cambridge Primary Insight be used to support different curriculums? How can it be applicable to a range of different teaching?
Yes, question that's often asked. And we describe most of the chem assessments as being curriculum independent, in terms of they're not fastened rigidly to any particular curriculum. But if you look at one curriculum next to the other, there are certain overlapping themes and content that is there, whichever curriculum you are following. So any curriculum that I know of will have at its core those skills of reading, so the mechanics of reading and the understanding that goes with it. So we would say that's fairly commonplace, as is kind of the arithmetic and the sort of the application of that knowledge and the problem solving things. So they are all kind of core strands of almost any curriculum that you're likely to come across. There is also the addition of the developed ability module, which probably doesn't appear in many curricula that I can think of, but is that sort of soft indicator of can a student solve problems? Can they sort of work creatively? Can they think creatively? So you've got the kind of core things that you'll find in almost all areas around the world within the various curricula. And then there's this sort of fairly unique non-curricular module which sits side by side and just tries to balance things off, takes a view of language, but also those kind of problem solving and inferential and reasoning skills, really. So we would hope, yes, it's not specifically linked to one curriculum, but there will be something there for you no matter which curriculum you are following.
Great, thank you, Mark. So I think that is all we have time for questions today. So just to say another thank you to Mark for his presentation. Really interesting to hear, and thank you all for attending and joining us today. We will have a look at any of the questions that we didn't get time to answer and get back to you. We will share the answers along with the recording of the session next week. If you found this webinar interesting and you'd like to chat to us further, please do get in touch. You can find all of our contact details on our website, or you can email chem@cambridge.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be holding more webinars in the coming weeks and months, so please do keep an eye out for any emails or on our website. And yeah, thank you once again for joining us today.